Thank you, Mr. Landrum, for seeing us. I know it's honorable, but we kind of want an informal interview situation. I asked some of the people in my group what they would like to ask of you. So some of the things that they wanted to ask of you is, what are your favorite memories of growing up in Spring Branch?
Wow, that's a big question, but I'll tell you, really, the best memories of growing up in Spring Branch was the community that we had. From one of my earliest memories as a small child was going to the Spring Branch High School football games.
Oh, wow.
You know, back then they didn't call it Reggie Grove Stadium yet,
right.
But it was in the same place. And many people don't remember that back in those days, my dad, who was the school superintendent, was also the football game announcer, which meant that we went to every Spring Branch football game, the home games and the away games, and so it was really wonderful. After the football games, there would always be a group that would meet in someone's home, and usually that was the members of the school board. Mm-hmm. And their kids, and so we grew up with all those guys, and that was it was a special community. You could really feel it back then.
It was. I just caught an early glimpse of it. Well, I didn't have as much as you did. How do you think that growing up in Spring Branch influenced your world?
Well, it's hard to say how it would have been different if I'd been somewhere else.
Right.
But the neat thing about our area, again, was that sense of community.
Right.
And of course, the schools were known for being really excellent schools.
Right.
And the thing that I think sets Spring Branch apart even today is the involvement of the parents in the schools.
Absolutely.
Obviously, that's something that I would love to encourage more of. There's no such thing as too much parental involvement. But you know, back in those days, we had lots of open land around here, and it wasn't uncommon that we didn't have Little League necessarily either. We had just the guys in the neighborhood get together on a vacant lot somewhere and play ball. And so those are kinds of formative experiences that a person can have, that you learn to get along with others, you learn to work out your problems without necessarily having a coach or a parent or somebody nearby. And we, in our little neighborhood here, I guess half the kids were 2 or 3 years older than I was, and then the other half were either my age or maybe a couple of years younger.
Right.
So we had quite a mix of people trying to get along together, and I remember those days very fondly. You know, we didn't have fences, and the dogs ran free, and so it was just a different way to get along.
Absolutely. Now, we are sitting in your childhood home, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
I grew up right here. After my mother passed away, my wife and I redid the house. But yes, I know all the trees by their first names.
That's great. So you said you went to the Spring Branch games, but you actually graduated from Memorial.
Right.
Elementary school and junior high.
Okay. Well, I went to Hunters Creek Elementary here, and then to Spring Branch Middle School, which was then junior high school.
Right.
Still is in my mind.
Right.
But the thing is, and while I was a Spring Branch Bear for all my life, they opened Memorial there right when I was in junior high school.
Right.
So the way they cut up the territory, there were only the 2 high schools at that time, but still I went to Memorial. And very soon after that, they opened Spring Woods, which was the 3rd school.
Right. So, because your father was the first superintendent of the school district, he saw the growth, and he came in 1941?
Actually, he and my mother moved here in 1939.
Wow.
Before that, Dad's first job out of school was to go to work as a teacher and coach and bus driver in the larger school that was just up the road in Addix. He was a teacher and coach at Addix High School. Well, of course, Addix High School isn't there anymore, and neither is the town of Addix. When he moved to Spring Branch, there was just one school. It was the Spring Branch School because it was a county school back then. We didn't have a district. And that school was located where Spring Branch Elementary School is today, up on Long Point, right there at Camden. After World War II is when the district really started. First of all, the district was formed as a district in after World War II, and that's when it really started to grow.
Wow. How does it feel to have a school named after you?
Well, it's not named after me, of course. It's named after my dad.
Right.
And that's really neat. I run into people all over Texas, really, who will look and you're from where, and are you related to, or I went to that school. Do you know about that school? Those kinds of questions. In fact, here about a year ago, I actually got to go over and talk to a group of 8th graders at Landrum Middle School, mostly about how important it is to really get high behind your work and to do a good job, and to decide what you want to be when you grow up, which I decided a few years ago myself, and to pursue that. And the way to do that, of course, is to learn as much as you can about as many things as you can.
Right.
And to just keep your eye on what you want to do.
Well, as you were talking about deciding what you wanted to do, as the son of the superintendent, why did you not go into education?
Well, there certainly was an inclination there. But to be honest with you, my dad wanted me to go to law school.
Really?
In fact, I think if it had been left to me, I probably would have drifted around a while before I finally figured out what I wanted to do.
Right.
And so once I got out of my undergraduate schooling, law school seemed like an easy thing to do. It was an easy choice to make. It's hard to go to law school, but the choice wasn't that hard. Knowing full well that I could have taught had I wanted to after law school, or done just about anything else that wasn't highly technical in nature. A law school education just by itself is a very, very good kind of education to have.
Absolutely.
Even if one doesn't want to go into practice law and be a lawyer, because laws, of course, are rules, and you can play any game better if you know the rules well.
Right, right. When your dad was superintendent of the school district, it make you feel weird in school?
Well, not weird exactly. I was always conscious that the teachers knew who I was, and they knew what phone number to call if I got in trouble.
Oh, no.
Because yes, if I got in trouble at school, the news got home before I did.
Oh, yes.
You know, if I was in trouble at school, I was in way more trouble at home. But what I'll tell you, what that was funny, in high school, the assistant principal at Memorial High School when I was there was Mr. Shopper. Mr. Shopper is today still on the Spring Branch ISD school board.
He was my principal too.
Okay, well back then, most of the time when he talked to me, he was telling me to go get my hair cut. You know, now these days that's not an issue, but back then it was the first time that long hair had come in for boys.
Which is important to note that at the time that you were there, it was during the Vietnam era, and
right.
And the influence of that time was the protests and things like that. Did you find yourself being drawn into protesting type thing? I mean, you said you had to cut your hair and things of that nature. It's pretty natural to be pulled in peer pressure wise or things of that nature.
Well, and not only that, when a young person is in that age group, that 16 to 18 year age group, it's natural to want to explore things and to find out what life is about. And yes, it was a time of a great awakening, which I thought may have had to do with some historical events in that time. I think it was really more a fact that that we were all just that age. And yes, you're right, there were things going on. There were protests over the Vietnam War. We had just gotten past the protests during the Civil Rights Movement, or at least the really intense ones.
Right.
We didn't have those protests in Houston back then,
right.
But we were very aware of that. So they were very tumultuous years. Mm-hmm. And so you couldn't help but get caught up in that.
Right. Vanessa Sanderson, I went to Landrum in 1997 to 1999. I would like to know if the school was named after him, and I explained to her that it was named after your father, and how it came to be, because that's where I met my husband. We have a little girl, and I would like to tell her more than that. That's where we met.
Sure. Well, the story about Landrum Middle School, Landrum Junior High, I still want to call it.
Right.
It was the second junior high school in the district.
Right.
The first one, of course, was Spring Branch Junior High School. Well, when they decided they needed another one because of the growth in the area,
right.
The members of the school board decided they wanted to name it after Dad, and he told them no. He did not want to have anything to do with that, and they overrode it, which is not something that happened all that often.
Right.
So I believe the school opened in 1957, if I'm not mistaken.
You would know better than I would.
Well, it could have been
Right.
1 year either way.
You were real young then.
I was very young then, but I do remember going to the dedication ceremony.
Right.
And somewhere in a box here, someplace, we still have a stuffed Landrum lion from that day.
Wow. I noticed online there was a book called Paw Prints from Landrum from 1961, and it's at a bookstore down in Galveston somewhere. And I was like, wow, but you know, so
That's a big one.
Yeah, and so you have Landrum. Do you have any other pictures that you could share with us?
Oh, we certainly have pictures.
Oh, awesome.
I don't know if you know, I couldn't tell you as I sit here right now what I
Right.
have. One of the photographs that we have here in a frame is a picture of my dad and me at a Spring Branch High School basketball game.
Wow.
You know, with the cowboy boots and the hat and the whole thing. It's just, you know, I think I was about 5.
That's what a lot of people don't realize about Spring Branch is it was very much farmland, and there wasn't any, this side is better than that side, and you know, I mean, the whole rivalry came about when the second school was built, I
Right.
believe.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. And there was this big schism because back when Memorial High School first opened, they had to decide how they were going to break up the football team.
Oh.
Because the Spring Branch Bears were really quite a force in their division in high school football back then.
Yeah.
And so there were 2 brothers named Alford. One of them stayed at Spring Branch and the other one went to Memorial.
I actually have them in my group, as a matter of fact.
Do you really?
Yes,
Okay.
I do.
I would be hard pressed. I think Chris Alford and his brother was Larry. They were way older than me, so forgive me if I'm missing.
That's fine. You said you were there announcing it with your dad when he was announcing, and so that explained a whole lot.
Well, Chris Gilbert was also in there, and he
Yes.
became, really quite a star at the University of Texas playing football.
And not at that time, but in 1960, Mike McQueen was in the area, and my dad actually coached him.
Oh, neat.
Over at the Little League at that time. Suzanne Metter says, I went to Landrum the first year it was open. Dr. Landrum was superintendent then and remained so until after I graduated. I believe SBISD was one of the top school districts in Texas under his direction. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel wonderful. Again, in some of our boxes, we have all kinds of plaques and awards that were given to Dad in the school district back then. And I still have some old clippings from some newspaper interviews that he gave as early as the mid-1950s and then going forward. One thing he always said, though, was the reason why the schools in Spring Branch were so good was because of the parents. He always gave credit to the parents for being involved in education and supporting it. Back then, the growth in Spring Branch was explosive, and I think every time that the school district needed something, somehow it was provided through the parent base. And that's because they understood how valuable a good education was for their kids.
Absolutely. The church St. Peter's was the first church, and actually the first school building, and they would start their service with a drum roll. I just found this out when I was in high school. I found this out, but that was also the first school building, and then they just built the school over there. The first language in Spring Branch ISD was German.
Right.
Which is, you know, so I'm seeing here, because I was an ESL assistant back in '91 and saw the different languages coming in, and I tested some of them when they were coming in, and it's just a diverse group where it wasn't back then. I mean, I think it was, but it wasn't. I don't know, I wasn't there.
Well, if you'll go and drive around Spring Branch, you'll see the names on the streets. You'll see Schuhmann, and you'll see Ogeman, and you'll see, I'm drawing a blank on some others, but you're going to see all kinds of Eastern European and you know, German and such names as that. And that's because most of the migrants who came to Texas in a certain period of time landed in Galveston from Northern Europe, and they just started traveling west from there.
Right.
My mother grew up in a little town called Moulton, which is out near Shiner, and their bilingual education was English and German.
Wow, how times have changed. Liz Redler asked, have you noticed the changes in the area? Are the changes for the better?
Gosh, how do you say that?
I know.
There have been huge changes. I really, you know, kind of long for the days when we didn't have so much traffic. Remembering when the Katy Road was a 2-lane road.
Oh yes.
And I also miss the fact that that kids don't get to go out and just, you know, go play and come home when it gets dark. Unfortunately, our big city just doesn't allow that like it used to.
Well, as I was sitting here, I just saw a bunny hop by. That was wild. Okay. Do you like the direction Spring Branch ISD is going in?
You know, I do. I think that Spring Branch ISD is really doing a good job adapting to the stresses and the needs of the current day. Dr. Klusman's done a really good job, and I'm sorry that he'll be retiring next year. Right. But again, he has enjoyed great support from the community, and I hope whoever is his successor gets that same backing. Right.
Well, I do know from my own experience of being in Spring Branch almost all my life, there's been a change. There's been, we got stuck with the oil bust, and you know, that had a big effect on, you know, how the schools changed going into the 90s, and how we had to adapt and overcome, and how we had to change what we taught, or how things were presented, so that we could help each student at their level. So anyway, I'm there with you on that one.
Well, and I think those are positive changes. You know,
absolutely.
As we've gone forward, we've learned how different people learn differently, and the schools are trying real hard to make that work so that everybody can succeed.
Liz also asked, what would you like Spring Branch to be identified with?
The schools.
Yeah. Just the schools?
Yep.
We don't have a whole lot, and that's one of the things that I've heard people say, you know, we don't have a museum, we don't have, you know, a museum district. I mean, we do, but we don't. You know, it's not something that we publish too much, but it's with the school district.
Well, we are part of the greater metropolitan Houston area, and so therefore we have our unique characteristics, just like some of the other small communities within this vast metropolitan area. But it's okay. It's pretty darn good.
All right. So now we're getting into Marla Arguello asked about interesting court cases.
Oh gosh, I could probably talk for a week about
I could talk to you all day.
And the reason court cases are interesting is because people are interesting.
Absolutely.
The courthouse is where humanity meets one another and the Constitution. Unfortunately, they do that under times of stress. You know, I would hope that nobody ever finds themselves in the courthouse as a party to any kind of either a civil lawsuit or a divorce or a criminal matter. But I do encourage that they come to the courthouse when they get their jury summonses,
Right.
And that's a whole discussion in and of itself.
Absolutely. It's a civic duty that a lot of people have just thrown under the rug or not gone and registered. But now they're changing things a little bit. If you register to vote, you're automatically put in for jury duty. And a lot of people weren't registering to vote. But now they've changed that up to now where it goes to your driver's license.
It goes to actually 3 or 4 different things like that. Driver's license, voter registration, I believe even some tax records are swept in to verify the list. And really most people, the way it works, I'm told, is that you will not receive a jury summons but about once every 3.5 years.
It's a civic responsibility to go and vote. It's part of becoming an adult.
Absolutely.
And it's part of, and being on the jury is that, you know, we can't leave it up to just the 10% of population that comes out to vote. It's everybody. And that's one of the things that was so special about Spring Branch, as you suggested, is everybody worked together. Everybody was like quote unquote family. And everybody did what they were supposed to do. And it's you know, everybody said, well, I don't need to do that, you know, it's going to go anyway. But really, yes, your vote does count. And we were taught this in government, and I know that a lot of people had to quit before this came out, and I think I was a senior in government, you know. So some people just didn't make it to senior year.
Well, the idea behind popular voting is so that everyone has a voice. You may not get your way, but you will at least have a say in what happens in the country and what happens with your representatives. That was so much in the forefront of the thoughts of our founding fathers.
Absolutely.
And it's not just voting, it's voting as an informed voter. It's learning what you're voting for and what the issues are, so that later on, if something happens, you'll know why it happened, or maybe you will know what you need to do to try and change something that you don't like. But yes, it is of critical importance that everyone take a role in our government. And if that role is running for office, fine. If that role is voting, fine. But be involved.
Right.
You just can't let someone else do this for you, because if you do, they very well may not be doing what you want to be done.
Absolutely. That's one of the good things that I have noticed about Spring Branch ISD, is that a good majority of the people that went to our school district are stand-up kind of people. They run for office, they invent things, they are actresses, they're musicians, there's so many that, you know, took that step. And I know you could have been just an attorney, but what made you decide to go ahead and be the judge?
Well, I got to a point in my life where I thought it was time to sort of contribute something back to the profession.
Right.
I have deep-seated in my heart a passion for the judiciary and the judicial branch of government and its role. You know, it's a little bit different than the legislature and the executive branches, because the legislature has control of the money, and the executive has control of the sword, the enforcement arm. And the only way that the judiciary can have a role in it and to moderate those two other branches is through a sort of moral authority. And that requires everyone participating to believe in the importance of courts and to trust in the importance of courts. And that's a lesson that we learned when we're playing Little League ball.
Right.
That the umpire will not always call it your way, but you have got to believe the umpire will call it the same way for everybody, and that's what keeps the game going forward, because without that, it would just break into chaos.
I like the way you just said that. I really do. That really makes a lot of sense, especially for young people that might have it to watch, because I know that there's going to be a lot of everybody saying, oh, I want to see. Denise also asked, you can leave history that no one else can. Have you ever thought about writing a book about your experiences? Have you written a book?
Well, I have not written a book, and there have been those times when I've toyed with the idea. Right now, I'm happy doing what I'm doing and enjoying what I'm doing, so I don't have any present plans to write a book.
Okay. You're an approachable person, and we have a lot of background together because I also graduated from Memorial High School. Spring Branch is everybody together, and that's a lot of the things that I try to stress is that, we're not that different.
We're really not, and you know, when people ask me what part of town I'm from, I never tell them, oh, I'm from Memorial. I always say I'm from Spring Branch because that's where my heart is and always has been.
So anyway, we are also here with Chris Rice. And Chris, do you have any other questions that you'd like to add?
Should I step inside?
You're off screen, but you can ask the question.
Speak up.
That's fine. Yeah, I guess what I asked you before, how did you decide to go into law? What impacts you want to make if elected judge? And what do you think is the most important thing to consider in this election?
Oh gosh, those are three very big questions, and the short answers are this. What I want to do as far as my service as a judge is to serve well and to serve honorably. As I mentioned a minute ago, if we all do our part, our country and our society will thrive. And I know that the decisions that I make every day are not going to change the course of human history. But you know what? If people are able to come to court and they can trust in our system, we'll all be way better off. That's my slant on that.
Thank you.
What else did I forget to answer?
I guess, why did you decide to study law?
Well, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after my undergraduate education, and I decided that a law education would be a good education regardless of what I decided to do. After law school, I needed to have a job, so I was lucky enough to be hired by a lawyer here in town, and just caught on from there.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you all.
And actually, I have one
Yes.
question.
Okay.
You being a judge, I know you might see some, deal with some criminal cases, every now and then. But where do you see us going in the future, as far as education, as far as politics? Where do you want to see us as a nation? Maybe as a city too, further progress.
Sure. I would like to see us as a nation come together to become more one nation. I would like for everyone to identify themselves first as Americans, and secondly maybe as Texans, and so that we can understand that we all want the same things in life, and that the fact that someone else also wants what we want is not a threat, it's an opportunity. I feel like if we can put aside the external differences that we may manufacture from time to time and to focus on where we want to be as a people, one people, it'll be much better off as we go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you personally would like anybody to know about Spring Branch or anything?
As I say, I could go on for hours and hours with stories that I've heard and things I know, and maybe we'll do that another time.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.